Welcome into the Inside Carolina Postgame Show. I'm your host, Tommy Ashley. We're sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt, JohnnyT-Shirt.com. Another special edition of this postgame because we've got an All-American, and then we've got Justin Jackson. John Bauman, I love you, but that was a bit much. That was a bit much. But you are definitely an All-American in my book. Justin, I want to get right in this. When you go into an ACC, or excuse me, an NCAA tournament, and you're highly favored, and you're seated higher, and everybody expects you to win. How difficult is it, or is it difficult to come out and handle business like North Carolina did today?
I will say I don't know if the first game is necessarily difficult from the standpoint of there's just such a big gap when it comes to size, talent, athleticism, um, things like that. I want to say we played Texas Southern in the first game of my junior year when we won it. So there's such a big gap that I think you just off of talent alone, you're able to kind of pull away from teams. But I think when you look at this game and when you look at this team, I think what their mindset was going into it, I think they applied that pretty decently. I think you saw right away the size difference is really what the biggest issue was for this Wagner team, and I mean they got they're basically one big in foul trouble early on, and then you had guys like Mondo and Withers really dominate inside, and so I think it's more difficult to stay locked in the majority of the game because you already know that you are just more talented and you're better than the team that you're playing against. Um, but I think what North Carolina did today is exactly what they were supposed to, and at the same time, they had things that they can definitely clean up, which I think is for me a good sign because you don't want to necessarily go into this game and walk away from it not feeling like you learned or you know don't have anything to fix. So I think this game is exactly what this team needed and exactly what it was supposed to be for.
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard to nitpick too much in March when you end up with a win. I think a good place to kind of really kick off the analysis is talking a little bit about Jae'Lyn Withers. We have a poll right now on the YouTube. I asked, who is your player of the game? And almost 70% of you have selected Jae'Lyn Withers. Just really impressive from him. I thought the game changed, honestly, when he came in the first half. Wagner obviously had some size disadvantages. At times it looked like Gulliver's Travels out there with the, Lilliputians or whatever those little guys are trying to stop Armando and Jae'Lyn Withers, but just excellent performance by him. He played one of the highest minute totals that he's played all season. I was looking back through Jae'Lyn Withers' sort of box scores from the year. He really hasn't played more than 20 minutes a lot this season. He played, I believe it was 24 minutes against Louisville, and then way back in November against Villanova and Northern Iowa, he played north of 20 minutes. But other than that, it's just sort of been spot appearances, 10, 12 minutes from him here and there. But tonight, UNC needed him, and he really stepped up his size. He was aggressive. He made some good passes as well, swinging the ball all over the court. Justin, what else stood out for you from Jae'Lyn Withers' performance?
For me, like we were talking about kind of before we came on here, everything he did was just simple. Everything that he did was whether it was getting out in transition, cutting, getting to the offensive glass. There was really never any situations where, we've seen it a couple times throughout the season where he's catching the ball, on the perimeter and he's, trying to ISO his man or maybe even trying to settle for mid-range jump shots or catch and shoot jump shots. Everything he had was going to the rim, and in a game like this, kind of going back to the whole aspect of him playing the most minutes he's played or some of the most minutes he's played all year. The tournament is all about what can the others do and when can you get certain guys to step up in certain games. When you look at our team in 2017 in Memphis, it was Luke May's region. And if you look at Luke May's minutes and his box scores throughout the year, I would probably say he's kind of in the same realm as far as not really playing above 20 minutes much all year long. And he was really the reason we made it out of Memphis, not just because of the shot, but because of both games there in that region. And I think that's kind of what you saw today with Withers. He came in, like you said, he changed the game as far as his energy, his aggressiveness. I mean, he got to the free throw line 9 times. And, the only real explanation for getting 9 free throws is just being aggressive. And, I think if he can do that on a consistent basis, obviously, I don't think he's going to necessarily have 16 and 10 every single game going through. Maybe he does, which would be great for us. But if he can just do the little things, the simple things, get out in transition, play defense, get to the offensive glass, that adds a different dynamic coming off the bench than what we've kind of had. And so, you have a guy like Mondo who finishes with 20 and 15, and he's dominating kind of throughout the game, but especially to start the game. And then you bring a whole nother guy onto the court that brings that same energy, if not more, a little bit more versatility. So, I mean, we've talked about him a lot throughout the season. It's kind of been him and Washington, and kind of seeing who can kind of give something off of the bench when it comes to the bigs. And I think today, he was kind of that guy who stepped up and had huge minutes for him.
Yeah, when you look at the numbers off the bench, Withers with 16 and 10, Washington with nothing and 1, and didn't play a ton. So it's interesting how they play off each other. It's usually one or the other if Carolina can figure out how to get them both. Real quick question, Justin, from 2017, and I don't want to spend much time on it, but how many points did Luke May score in the Final Four?
Oh, I don't know. Did he score any? I don't know if he scored any.
None. After being that good in the regional. That's crazy.
And
it speaks to what you're talking about, though.
That's the thing. It's a lot of people they kind of look at the big moments throughout the tournaments, right? They look at the dunk, they look at Kennedy's block in the championship, they look at Luke's shot against Kentucky. But a lot of times it's the little moments that guys who aren't necessarily, the top guys on the team step up to make, whether that's Kennedy's rebound against Oregon or that's, a block shot throughout the game against Gonzaga. Like it's little moments that end up adding up to win games in the tournament because every possession means more. So, I think that's a perfect example of you go from Luke averaging basically a double-double. So he had 16 and 10, I want to say, in one of those games, and then kind of around the same in the next game in Memphis, and then doesn't score at all in the Final Four. It's like, he took advantage of those little moments in that Memphis region and ended up getting us to that Final Four to be able to win. So I hope Withers can continue this throughout the tournament. I hope it's not a, show up one game and then we disappear. But, I think today his moment was big for this team.
Yeah, it's Melvin Scott in 05 hits free throws to basically ice, I think, the Villanova game, if I remember correctly. But yeah, guys have to step up and play. And one person I want to ask you about. We can talk about Baycott's 20 and 15. He was so much bigger. RJ was RJ in the second half. I think he had 17. Elliot Cadeau struggled today, and they didn't need him to play well. They're going to need him to play well in the game we'll talk about in just a minute. But being a freshman in that position, what'd you see from him watching his game today? Is it just a freshman bump? Is it just one game? What from your trained eye, what were you seeing there?
I'll say I hope it's just one game. I'll say that because he is so important to this offense, just from playmaking ability. He's kind of really one of the only guys on the team that can get downhill and put pressure on the rim outside of the bigs. I think we've seen it at times throughout the season, you're just seeing a 19-year-old kid going against guys who are 4th, 5th year guys that are more physical. They've been around basketball a little bit longer when it comes to college. And it's a brand new, even though, the talent difference the gap is pretty wide. It's a brand new team. You go through 18 games in the ACC and you basically know your opponent every single game you go into it. You know where you were effective the game before you played against them. You know the type of defensive schemes that these guys play. the amount of film that they probably have on Wagner was probably only the first 4 game that they played against Howard. That's probably really the only film that they probably have realistically to watch. So I think you kind of saw just it was a combination of him trying to figure out, kind of what it is. The lights are definitely a little brighter. Doesn't matter if it's a 1 versus 16. I mean, it's a winner and you go home, so the pressure's a little bit different. And then, it's a different type of opponent, So thankfully, we didn't necessarily need him, but obviously we don't want to look ahead yet. But going into these games going forward, I think he's going to be a big part. So hopefully you can kind of figure it out on the fly and make it better.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a trend with Elliott. He didn't have a super strong finish to the ACC tournament tonight. The stats: 0 for 2 from the field. He had 3 rebounds. He had it looks like 3 assists to 4 turnovers. Finished with 0 points. And like you're saying, Justin, that's just not good enough in March for a point guard of a team that wants to win a national championship. That's just sort of the reality of it. He is going to have to adjust as well to teams sagging off of him throughout the entire NCAA tournament. I mean, you look at Michigan State, that's a well-coached team. There's not much of a turnaround, but that's probably one of the first things that they're going to circle on the scouting report. This guy, Cadeau, you can sag off of him. He's not a shooting threat. And I think, if I'm Hubert Davis, I'm going in and challenging Elliott to say, hey, you've got to step it up, not just offensively, but just overall with his effort. It doesn't necessarily have to be scoring points, but you can do things like if you're sort of just being left alone on an island, you can cut to the basket and you can make yourself available to Armando Bacot in the paint. He did some good things tonight. Certainly, he kind of played in that role in the middle of the zone and moved the ball well there. And certainly, UNC had a huge win, so you don't want to be too tough on Elliott. But you're looking at this game in the context of a North Carolina team that wants to win a national championship. And this is not a performance that would get it done in a Final Four, one of those types of games. But he's a freshman. He's going to bounce back quickly. He's got an opportunity on Saturday against Michigan State to come out, be aggressive, drive the ball to the basket, have a lot more energy, because we've seen him play with that passion plenty of times before this season.
Yeah, I think too, to kind of wrap up with him, I think it's the unfortunate thing is all season long you have the excuse of he's a freshman, he should be a senior in high school. Well, now that kind of goes out the window, right? Like now it's like, okay, no, you're one of our main guys. We need you to step up. We need you to play better. You mentioned Michigan State. Michigan State has some older, more physical guards that have been around for a while. So for Elliott and for this team, there has to be some sort of way, like you said, for him to bounce back, for him to figure out ways, because we've seen it throughout the season. We've seen him be effective when teams do sag off. We've seen him be effective whenever maybe he's the guy that, they key in on everybody else and he's kind of the last option. We've seen that before and we've seen him be effective with it. I think it's just a matter of him getting out of his own head. I think that's kind of what you saw a few times. There were a couple of drives that he had that you could tell from when he hit the 3-point line, there was nothing there at all. And yet he still tried to force it. And, there was a charge called on one of them. I think there was a turnover on another. And so there's just, you can kind of tell today, and whether it was just the flow of the game, because it was such a big man type of game, this game really was, other than the second half, whenever they really couldn't, they had to start doubling and sagging off shooters. The whole first half was basically just feed the big man or go to the offensive glass and get offensive rebounds. So at times the flow of the game can kind of mess you up a little bit too. But for this team to be as good as I think they can be, or as they want to be, he does have to be a lot better than today. And so, hopefully he can kind of bounce back and learn from it and move on.
Yeah, in regards to the turnovers, he had 4, like you mentioned, John, and Carolina had 4 or 5 early and only finished with 9 for the game. So I think that is a big thing. And I'm not saying that all 4 early were Cadeau's or whatever. I don't know the numbers there, but Carolina was able to cut them out and cut them down. And this is one of those type games why I don't bet on first round games. Carolina was up 12 with 10 minutes left and wins by 30. I mean, that is exactly why I don't mess with that. But it's in regards to Cadeau, This is a young guy who puts a lot of pressure on himself, and you can see it. He wears it on his face more than anybody. He's gotten better about it, but he's going to have to come up big, and I think he will. And we'll talk about it in just a second. Against Michigan State, like you said, Justin, they got guards, and they got old, crusty guards that know how to play the game more than that can play it better than their talent, and they're also talented. So, John, that's the thing. You wanted to mention Harrison Ingram and Cormac Ryan. Cormac Ryan's been in the NCAA tournament before. Harrison Ingram never has. And I don't think Jae'Lyn Withers ever has. But, John, start us off on Cormac and Harrison before we flip the page to Michigan State.
Yeah, something that Justin and I have talked about all season long on the Shooting It Straight podcast is consistency from those guys. I think tonight, and by those guys, I'm talking about Harrison and Cormac. I think tonight we saw that consistency. I liked the first possession of the game, UNC going to the block and kind of putting Harrison in a post up. I like that sort of setting the tone for the night, getting Harrison involved. If UNC is going to make a deep run in the tournament, they're going to need both of those guys specifically to step up. Good efficiency from both of them tonight. Harrison, 4 of 7 from the field. Cormac, 5 of 11 from the field, including 2 of 6 from the three-point land. I mean, it feels like if Cormac shoots the ball like he did against Duke, or even if he just shoots it like he does tonight in that 33 to 40% range, this is a very tough team to beat. So I really like that from Harrison and Cormac. Great first game of the tournament. Keep it going for both of those guys.
Yeah, they
Go ahead.
Let me go ahead and do this. Let's talk about Johnny T-shirt for a second. We'll do short reads on the post game. Johnny T-shirt, they got all the swag you can get, and they get it quickly, right? You don't have to wait. Like if you're a fan of another school and you just want a major championship, you don't have to wait for a week before the gear to come in. Johnny T-shirt's got it all right away, and so you need to check them out at johnnytshirt.com and Johnny T-shirt on Franklin Street. Also, congruityhr.com/Tar Heels. Get a small to mid-sized business assessment. They grew their business from national or local to national. They can do the same for your small business. Justin, looking ahead, there was a question in the chat. It said, Kenny Smith, I'll put it up here. Kenny Smith said the 8-9 game for 1 seeds is the toughest game of the tournament. Do you agree with that, and what challenges do they present? Just looking ahead, Carolina plays Michigan State at some point Saturday. Everybody knows who Michigan State is. They sort of made a bad offensive Mississippi State team look worse offensively. And they did it with some guys. This is a team that was, if my memory serves, they were 4th in the nation in preseason.
Yeah.
So they've got talent. Justin, this 8-9 matchup, not necessarily Michigan State, Carolina, but just in general for these 1 seeds, these have caused some problems over the years.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a year like this year, I think it's even more, it can cause even more problems. I mean, because like you said, this team was a top 5 team going into the season. And now all of a sudden you're putting that team who, people thought was good, have talent. They have talent. Things just didn't work out throughout the season, maybe injuries or just some bad losses. And now you have to play them in the second round. So it causes issues from the standpoint of you play against a team like this, like Wagner, who you're just better than, you're bigger than, you're more physical, you're more athletic. And now all of a sudden you got to make a jump from that, a 30-point blowout, to, okay, this is a really good team coming in here that we're playing against. It doesn't matter if they're 8-9 seed, we're 1 seed. They're also coached by one of the most respected coaches to ever coach in college basketball. So when you look at those type of matchups and those things, I think it definitely is an issue. I mean, I think the toughest part with a team like Michigan State is just the experience that this team has. I mean, I swear, I feel like I don't watch a lot of Michigan State basketball, but I swear the last 4 or 5 years, I've seen the same guys on the team every single time I turn Michigan State game on. And so it's like, you have a game like that where now you're going against, obviously we have some older guys on our team as well, but you've got a guy like Elliott, like we talked about. You have a guy like Harrison who hasn't been to the tournament, or Withers. You've got certain guys that have never really been in this kind of setting. And so it can definitely cause some issues. I think the biggest thing is going to be, once again, consistency throughout this next game. We're going to need Cormac to hit shots consistently throughout the game. We're going to need Harrison to be able to step up whenever those shots come to him and knock down shots throughout the game. And then, we're going to need guys to do all the little things, because I can see this game being more of a grinded out type of game than just a free-flowing, talent, skill-oriented game, just from how Michigan State plays and how physical and, old Michigan State really is. So, it's definitely going to be a different look of a game. And for college basketball fans in general, these are the type of matchups I think that make the tournament fun. But obviously, we hope that North Carolina can go in there and kind of, hopefully hit them in the mouth early and kind of keep that momentum going.
I've got some stats about Michigan State that are not going to make people feel good, unfortunately. This is not a normal 9 seed. This is a very, very good 9 seed. In the KenPom rankings, Michigan State is ranked 16th overall. So they should be, theoretically, if it was going by KenPom, a 4 seed. And they are the number 6 adjusted defense on KenPom. So that shows they're a very good defensive team. Another stat nugget that I dug up, they are the highest rated 8-9 team in KenPom. In the list of all the 8s and 9s, they're the highest one at 16. That's a very dangerous team the last few years. Last year, the highest rated KenPom 8-9 team was Florida Atlantic, who made their way to the Final Four. So that shows that's a very dangerous team. The year before that, the highest rated 8-9 team was North Carolina. If you remember, UNC was the 8th seed when they went on that big run to the Final Four and national championship game. And the year before that, it was, I believe, it was Loyola Chicago, and they beat Illinois, and they knocked off the 1 seed there. So that top-ranked 8-9 team, maybe the team that's underseeded, that's been a very dangerous team the past few NCAA tournaments. So this is a game that North Carolina should take very seriously. They should take Michigan State not at the 9 seed, but at face value for the team that they are, and prepare for this game accordingly.
I think when you look at the stats as well, and Justin talked about it, the guards that they have, you've got Walker, Akins, and Hoggard. You got a grad student, old guy, in Walker, played a ton of basketball. Atkins or Akins, he hit some shots today. He's a junior, and then Hoggard's a senior. So North Carolina's going to need to rely on their experience. And Justin, I'll kick this to you. The experience of being there and having done it before, how big a factor is it when you get in these type games? Because every time you guys, whether it was your team in 09 a little bit against LSU when they had a somewhat close game, but every other time teams have had to lean on the older guys to step up and play. Baycott and RJ have been in it. Mm-hmm. Nobody else really has. How important is the experience factor and bringing that leadership to these younger, inexperienced guys at this point in the tournament?
I mean, for me, experience wins in the tournament, period. I think the only team that I can truly remember in a while that has won with basically majority freshmen is that Duke team in 2014, 2015 with
15. But they also had Quinn Cook, who was a senior on the team.
They had, who I think Emil Jefferson still there?
I believe so. Another old guy.
So they had some older guys, but the majority of them were young. So that for me, that's really the only team that I can think of. Everybody freaked out whenever Zion and RJ Barrett and Cam Reddish, like that team didn't win. And you look at some of the other teams that have been throughout college basketball where they've had some unbelievable freshmen, and you just kind of wonder, why can't they win? Well, there's something about playing just all kinds of different brands of basketball that gives you kind of that upper hand. Playing as a freshman, you go into college as a freshman, you don't really know what playing hard is. You don't really know what working hard is. You don't know what real physicality is yet. And so you go through kind of that first season as a freshman, and it's your first time experiencing some of the different aspects of college basketball, right? It's the first time where you really have to box out your man and you can't just go get a rebound. There's certain things where you have to really know who you're guarding to know, hey, if I'm closing out to this guy, I know he likes to drive right, so I need to make sure to close out that way. When you're in high school, you just close out however you want to. So you throughout that whole first year, you experience new basketball. So like Elliot is experiencing brand new basketball. He's experiencing a different kind of work ethic you have to have, a different kind of physicality you have to play with, speed, all that kind of stuff. Well, you had 2-3 more years onto that 1 year, and you've basically played any kind of basketball that you need to play that you'll experience throughout a season. And so I think really whether you've been there or not, having those years of experience, it's almost like in your subconscious. When you see a situation, you've seen it before. And so now you're able to adjust to it, whether it's individually, as a team, whatever it might be, and you're able to change it and go out there and play a different way. So when I look at this North Carolina team, like you said, Mondo and RJ, they've played at the highest level in college basketball, making it all the way to the championship game. So they've seen it. Cormac has played a lot of college basketball, but he hasn't necessarily played a lot of this level college basketball. Then you have a guy like Harrison who hasn't even played, him and Jae'Lyn Withers and Elliott and, certain guys, Washington, certain guys, they haven't played in the tournament time at this level. So to your point, this is going to fall back on the leadership of Mondo and RJ, whether that is within the game, like, hey, things kind of start to come unraveled a little bit. Michigan State might go on a 6-0, 8-0 run, pull everybody in and say, hey, guys, we're okay. That's their run. Let's go make our run. Or whether it's just before the game, maybe guys aren't taking it as serious as they probably should be. Like, hey, guys, this team is a good team, and there's certain things we're going to have to do throughout the game. Whatever that looks like, it's going to fall on them to lead this team, and everybody else should follow. So, for us, thankfully, we really didn't have any other than Luke coming in. Again, during the Memphis region, we really didn't have any underclassmen that played a lot. So we already had guys who had already been at the highest level the year before and kind of knew what it took to get back to where we need to get to. So hopefully those guys can lead. Just from kind of seeing certain interviews and seeing certain things that have been said, it seems like Mondo is in a place of, trying to kind of be that leader. I think RJ is kind of in that same boat. But it's going to take everybody, and hopefully everybody can kind of add all that experience up that they do have and, come out and hopefully get these guys in that green, next game on Saturday.
I'll, Tommy, real quick, hit these comments. Someone calls out they are 20-14 Michigan State. They've lost 14 times. I would counter their strength of schedule is 8th in the country. They've played a very tough schedule. They played Purdue twice in basically this month, and they lost each time by just a few points, single digits. So this is a very talented team. And to close it out, Justin, we had this question for you as well. This is from Mitch's M240. If you were a coach for a day, what would you tell Elliot to help with his shooting?
Well, I first want to go back and talk about the previous comment, because that's a comment that I would expect a fan to say. I think my freshman year, we lost – how many games did we lose? We definitely lost double digits, at least 13, something like that.
I'll look it up. Well, your freshman was 14, 15?
14, 15.
All right.
And we made it to the Sweet 16 and lost to Wisconsin, who ended up making it to the championship game against Duke. Yeah. And that game, and obviously you can look back and say, oh, we could have won that, we could have done this. We played that game extremely close the entire time in the Sweet 16 against obviously the runner-up. So I don't think you can ever look at wins-loss column and say, oh, this team's not that good. I don't care what Kim Palm says. I don't care what we were still a really good team, and we just had some really bad losses throughout throughout the season. So hopefully North Carolina doesn't take that same mindset and going into this game against Michigan State. But to answer the question about as a coach, if I were to help Elliott, I think the tough thing about shooting is all about repetition, right? And so right now in the season, it's really tough to say, well, hey, let's get in the gym and get 1,000 shots up, or let's get in the gym, let's work on the mechanics here and there. I think for Elliott, it's a matter of just staying confident. So whether that is him, maybe they're helping off, 2 or 3 possessions in a row, and they swing to him, and he just shoots it with no hesitation, confidently stepping into it. He might miss it, he might make it, but it's a matter of staying confident. Once the other team sees, okay, well, this plan that we have as far as not guarding you is working. Now they can even press even further into, okay, we're just not going to guard you at all. Like, we're not even going to rotate to you. So I think for Elliott, it's not necessarily about how would I help him shooting the ball. It's more of what are different ways if your shot's not falling, or maybe you're not shooting the ball, what are other ways that you can still be effective? And we talked about this the last show with talking about Seth and even, Jae'Lyn Washington and Withers and guys like that, of how there's certain ways you can affect the game. There's still ways, even though he's a point guard, there's still ways he can cut. There's still ways he can be a screener, because now his man is further off him. And so whoever he's screening for is going to come off more free. He can still sometimes look to go to offensive glass because he is athletic. There's just little things that you can still do to be effective. Now, is it pretty? No, it's not necessarily something you would want to do. You want to be the guy who's shooting the ball, attacking the rim, making sweet passes, whatever it might be. But there are certain things that he can do. So for me, if I were to look at him and say, hey, look, Elliott, going into this game, if they help off you like this, I want you to start setting more flare screens. I want you to start, if you're the guy that they swing to, or you're the next pass, I want you to start setting more down screens, or setting more, more actions to get guys who are maybe shooters coming off, as opposed to you just being the guy who they swing it to, and now the offense kind of stops. So, that's kind of what I would probably do for him. It's tough in this moment because you got one day. You have one day to prepare for this Michigan State team, and then you got to go back out there on the floor and you got to do whatever it is that you prepared for. So I'm sure the guys, those coaches over there, I'm sure they see that it is something that other teams are trying to take advantage of. And, it's something that, you've got to try to figure out, kind of on the fly, certain adjustments that you can make.
That is Justin Jackson talking about how to be effective even when the shot's not falling. I'd let it rip. They'd have to take me out because I shot too much. I'd be like, son, sit down. You're shooting us out of it. Talking about Elliott Cadeau, I think Cadeau, it's why Seth Trimble's so important to this team now. Cadeau played 19 minutes. Seth had only 13 minutes today, but he's going to be necessary against Michigan State and those big guards and experienced guards. And I don't know the game time yet. I have a feeling it's going to be later in the afternoon or in the evening, but I guess we'll find out when CBS decides to make the decisions after all the games are done today. Justin Jackson, John Bauman, it's been the post-game show. I'm Tommy Ashley. Of course, Carolina beats Wagner 90-62, advances in the NCAA Tournament. It's March Madness, baby. 4 screens, man. YouTube TV is the way to go. 4 screens and another screen on the side with some stats on it. You can't beat all that stuff. It's a junkie's dream.
Right. Best time of the year, that's for sure.
Absolutely. And shout out to the 500 plus that have joined us for the post game. Shout out to everybody that supports Inside Carolina. Stay tuned for all of Adam and Jeremiah and Taylor's content from Charlotte. We'll be back Saturday whenever they tell us we can come back. Thanks, everybody.